All right, y'all. So we are here, the property committee meeting. We are meeting today to discuss the RFP for the Taylor Grady House. And so we've got two of our committee members here. We've got Commissioner Parker and Commissioner Davenport, and Commissioner Wright is not able to join us. But today we're going to be talking through the actual RFP, and we'll be able to see that up on the screen here, y'all. We've provided that. But one thing we want you to know as we go through this, the changes that have been made, because there's a lot of different colors in this RFP. There's yellow, blue, green, red, and gray, but the changes we're going to be discussing are going to be the gray and underline. So those are the changes that have been made. And so Central Services, Gavin and Angel have worked to incorporate the feedback we got last time. I think they did a great job. So I think this will be a quick meeting, but we are literally wanting to get your feedback to incorporate in this, and then we're going to go post it. I think it's for 45 days. Mm-hmm. And so after this meeting, we hope to have enough feedback to where we all are in agreement that it's ready to go, and we'll go ahead and post it. And the next time we meet, we'll be discussing the potential applicants.
All right. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm losing my voice. I don't know why. So Junior League, they're out. So
yeah, they're at least ends at the end of
the end of this.
Yeah, their lease ends at the end of this month. And then there'll be a move out period of a couple weeks to move whatever is theirs out. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you said 45 days. So I'm just okay.
Yep.
So 4 or 5 days from July 1st?
45 days from when we post the application.
Okay. All right.
And we are aiming for around that timeline, Commissioner.
All right.
But we'll talk process when we get to that point in the RFP because it outlines all the steps. So you'll see once we receive them after 45 days, there's still potential interviews and everything else like that. So,
okay.
All right. So with that, first step on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the May 18th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Y'all ready to keep moving?
Yes.
We're going to begin going through the Taylor Grady House RFP. So it's up on the screen. We'll blow it up a little bit. I can go print copies if y'all want hard copies. But
can you email this? Was this emailed to us as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll pull out my laptop.
You sure?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, because I can go print.
Yeah,
Just want a copy.
That Salem trees.
And it was a couple weeks ago because it was in preparation.
Right. That's why. But you can go ahead and start. I'm going to look at it up here for now.
Okay.
All right. Well, not too much on this page. Cynthia, you can go right on into the next one. Not so much even on this one. This is highlighted yet to basically fill in some of the blanks once we talk with our finance department and we gain approval from this committee to move forward. We'll sort of fill in some of these blanks as far as the actual posting date, when we'll require the mandatory pre-proposal conference, as well as any on-site inspections of the property. But we'll have to work that out with our finance department with their schedules as well. So that's why this hasn't been filled in here. Let's go ahead to the next page and even skip that page 3 because there's nothing there. And then on to 4. Okay. So right at the bottom, right there. As far as references, we talked about this the last time the committee was together and how we were going to not only state that we would prefer, public and private agencies, municipalities, or at least contracts with those typical entities, but we wouldn't limit somebody from submitting, obviously, just because they didn't have experience with a municipality or anything like that. If they had private experience, hosting weddings, hosting other events, that they should still be allowed to do so. And we even go further into that detail further on, but this was just sort of an initial reference highlight for anybody interested in applying. And what we'll do there is, I think Commissioner Wright had a edit to one of those sentences that it says has operated a similar facility. We're going to say in a similar facility.
That sounds great.
Okay.
And then just that spelling there, guys.
Organization.
Yes.
So we'll run stuff.
All right.
So we'll be good.
Okay. Next page 5. All right. Nothing too much changed here, maybe just a few, edits that we did on our part, just to specify again that they need to list any equipment and supplies they expect to have on site. ACC Gov is not anticipated to provide any of those supplies. Obviously, if they're wanting us to think about it, they can certainly include that in their proposal, but that's not something that we're necessarily putting out there for them. In number 8, again, this is just to say that it entails the Taylor Grady House for purpose of holding events, as well as any of the grounds and a full list of uses in anticipation of that section 3 where we specify all the uses. Okay. Nothing on the next page, Cynthia. Let's go to page 7. This we may have to modify a little bit once we talk with finance and get all of the processes down, but the one gray sentence there in the opening purpose paragraph talks about how this initial term will be for a 1.5 year period with the option to extend a contract for additional 1 year lease terms. The reason it's a 1.5 year period when our typical process is 1 year is because we anticipate this RFP going out in the next couple months and getting finalized. It'll be mid-year. We usually start our leases July 1st. So we would anticipate somebody signing into a lease with us before the end of this calendar year or right around that time, give them the beginning of 2023. And I think it would be unfair for somebody to make a commitment like that for 6 months only of guaranteed lease. So let's just go ahead and wrap the following year into that, if that's okay with the committee.
Would it make sense to list the lease end date as to time it up with the other leases for if it needs more time or less time for us to find the leasee?
Yes.
That way it's instead of saying 1.5 years, and that still leaves it off of the regular lease cycle.
Yes, that's a good point, Commissioner, because we do that in a different spot in the document, but I think that would just clear it up. Instead of worrying about the how many months or 1.5 years, we'll just say the end date on that. Okay. Sort of that RFP timeline that's in the next paragraph there, that is all stuff we actually need to talk with finance about. This is just establishing the dates and the times of site visits and when they can submit. And we have to work that out with our finance department. So, all right, nothing else on that page or the following page, Cynthia. Let's go to page 9, the award of the contract. If you'll remember, the last time we came before the committee, we actually had some options. And it talks about how we can either award it to one person, we can award it to multiple agencies and things like that. So what we did is we took away those options based on your feedback last time, and we just put it into one concise paragraph that basically says this is what we're expecting. Okay. It tells that they were going to be graded on their past performance as well as their technical trade-offs, and again that the lease itself will be determined by the mayor and commission upon review and recommendation, and the multiple awards in the next section that we reserve the right to either make one award or multiple awards depending on how the bids come in. If there's an entity that perhaps only needs one floor of the building and there's another one that needs an opposite floor and the committee feels strongly that this would be the best proposal, we just reserve that right as a committee to make multiple awards. Okay? All right, next page, Cynthia. On page 10, place of performance. This is where we just specified the site and the location. And we made it clear that Town and Gown is a neighboring tenant and that they agree to work in good faith with each other, and that is our expectation. So, right. We can skip on to the next page, even past the next page, Cynthia. Let's go to 12. Okay, so I will make that same change in that first sentence there about the 1.5 year period. We'll make it consistent throughout the document as far as an end date instead of a 1.5 year period. And then when we get into the proposed use, we rearranged some things, we changed the wording a little bit. Not a lot of this criteria is new. If anything, we took out, I think it was tea rooms that the committee said we probably didn't need to include. So we just specified a little bit more clearly some of the uses that you felt would fit. Was there any question on the final uses?
Is Atheniana like things that are Athenian?
I think so. And
That's-
honestly,
Yeah,
I pulled that language from the existing lease.
yeah, I didn't know if that was like a neologism or what, but I like that. Or like an entity. I was like, oh, I've never heard of it.
Commissioner Wright asked the same thing.
Okay.
Is it
We can,
memorabilia
yeah, I mean, we can change it to memorabilia.
I mean, is that what it is, I guess?
That's how I interpret it. And again, I wish I could take credit for it, but that I pulled, I think, from the existing language within the lease that we currently have with the junior league.
It might be good just to add memorabilia in parentheses or something.
Okay.
I like to Commissioner Parker's point, I like the word, if we're not sure what it means.
Sure.
We want to make sure the applicants know.
Yes, we can do that. Okay. So number 2, description of space needs. What we did here is, I think we came to you last time with the question about the basement and how we weren't sure if that was going to be included in the use of the building or a lease. I think it's been further determined administratively that at this point in time, we're not interested in utilizing the ground floor or the basement for a government purpose. So essentially, we would reopen that basement up just like it has been in years past to the junior league. Basically, the entire building. If you can utilize the entire building as a tenant, we're okay with that. So we specified first, second, and third floors on that.
So ACC Golf see no future use currently for any spot or any space in the building.
I think administratively, we talked about it amongst management and amongst staff, and when looking at the cost to rehab the basement for a government purpose, it was sort of cost prohibitive at this point in time.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, number 3.
Now, in theory, could somebody different apply for the basement versus the first and second floor? Conceivably, the multiple uses might be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might have multiple tenants, and might use one floor versus another. That's a possibility.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Commissioner Davenport, we actually did make reference to, I think it was you that wanted to talk about the wall penetration. So I think it's a good point, though. It's a historic structure. We don't want to damage things beyond what we have to. We also talked about pets. What we did here is we made it clear that other than service animals, pets are not permitted inside the facility. I think that still leaves some option for, if somebody had, I think it was talked about like a horse-drawn carriage or something the last time, that it wouldn't prevent somebody from doing that outside in the parking lot. So that's the change we made there, if y'all are comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Don't bring the horses inside.
That's right. We went on to specify a little bit about the shared rental facility and how, again, per the leasing policy, which is still subject to mayor and commission approval once a tenant is selected, there is the option for a community benefits agreement, which will also help set the rate of any fees for rent. So that paragraph just got added in there.
And with regard to a profit percentage share for the leasing policy, do we have like a lot of precedent with that previously? Because in our recent discussion of how to, various government facilities and space needs, it came up that I think there's only one private for-profit entity currently leasing government space, and so I don't know if you're referring to our general leasing policy or this that we're looking at here, because if it's a for-profit entity, I don't know if that at all varies from what we normally do in that regard.
And so what we did is we pulled that language right from the leasing policy. It wasn't strictly because of this particular building.
Yeah.
Angel might be able to give some clarification as to, I don't know if have we actually seen some shares from
No, it
that
was,
percentage?
no,
Okay.
it was all part of the new policy, and so far we've like renewed the leases without putting that part in place for like just 1 year at a time and then another year at a time. But it is supposed to go into effect July 1 of this year. The whole leasing policy is
Okay.
supposed to go into effect.
So yeah, we haven't actually seen, any sort of return to Athens-Clarke County as far as a profit share.
Okay.
From any of our tenants. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
just new territory on it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then that last sentence in that bullet point before number 4 is just, obviously will take care of some of the major facility maintenance needs, with the exception of deliberate acts that would damage the property.
And Angel, it's not, just to go back real quick,
Mhm.
we were bringing forward potential leases that would have implemented the new policy, but it was decided to extend that dollar
Yes.
an additional year, so it's not this July, right? It would
Right,
be
it'll be the next
following
July,
just-
yeah.
Just because July 1 is very close for anybody watching from home.
But that's a good point, because I mean, I don't know, will this part of that policy go into effect this year, or will it be next year?
It would be contingent on
Yeah.
the leasing policy going into effect, likely.
I would agree. I think because the mayor and commission extended the leases that are to take effect July 1st
Mhm.
for $1, for all of this coming year,
Mhm.
that I would say that that part would probably first take place the following year if,
Okay, it may have been specific, but the reason I ask is because we did put some, at least one part of the leasing policy into place, and that is that we won't pay utilities for anybody.
Mhm.
And so we made them start that this year. So that's why I was wondering if that, maybe we just did it especially just for the
Actual-
utilities
Lease amount.
and not the rest of the policy. That's what it sounds like we did.
Yeah.
So,
okay. For number 4, what we did is we pulled some language again, even from some previous leases where we talk about how, it's an expectation or at least part of, the proposal by any offerers to say how they're going to utilize as many resources of the community as possible when operating the house, and how they plan to benefit the greatest amount of our citizens. For example, historical societies, garden clubs, preservation societies, other things like that.
Where did you say you pulled that language from?
We've had some of that in, I think, even the existing lease that was with the junior league, actually.
Some of the language in like the first clause kind of strikes
Okay.
me as strange, because I'm like, oh, we're gonna use as much, resources, could be a lot of things, we're gonna use as much water as possible. I feel like it's referring to social resources.
Sure.
Like drawing on, social capital or infrastructure. So I think just making that clear that we're not asking them or hoping that they will use the most electricity
Very good.
possible.
Yes, we can specify social sources. Okay. And again, to try and guarantee that the house will be open to all citizens of the county for functions in keeping with the character of the house. Obviously, that doesn't preclude somebody from hosting private events, but at the same time, I think there's an expectation, or at least there will be when reviewing these proposals, that there are certain times throughout the year where the house is open
Yeah,
as more of
some
a
kind of
community
public function, yeah.
function. Yeah. Okay.
And we just want to clarify residents there instead of citizens.
Yes.
In both paragraphs, just change citizens to residents.
Okay. All right. And then, just that last paragraph of number 4, talking about how, any occupation, trade, or use of the property shall not constitute a nuisance, and shall be in compliance with all applicable acts and laws. So, okay, going into general requirements, we had talked about specifically with the access control number 2. We did talk to the fire marshal and had them review the property. I think it's basically safe to say that any user is expected to be in compliance with the calculated fire assembly load at that time. Depending on how or if they decide to modify or do minor modifications to the inside or what rooms they actually intend to use or levels, that could have an effect on the overall occupancy of a fire load. So basically, I think if we just say you're expected to meet the fire code, whatever your final design ends up being. So, and here is where we can pull some of that same language in number 3. Contract performance period shall be from the date of award until June 30th, 2024. And so what we'll do is we'll transfer that to some of those other areas that we had talked about. In hours of operation, again, I didn't necessarily want to, I don't think the committee wanted to specify certain hours, just that they, again, comply with any of our other ordinances that would be applicable, like noise, things like that. So I think as long as it's a reasonable event, rather than putting like a 9 o'clock timeline on it, you know, as long as we don't go complaints and things like that, I think we should consider it if the committee's okay with that.
Don't know about that last sentence then.
Okay.
I mean, it says may result in immediate termination of the lease agreement shall result in the following graduated restrictions to hold outside events. But we don't have anything under that. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we can look into,
Okay.
yes, we'll look into that last sentence there. If anything, we may have to take it out. I can check with code enforcement, but we might just take out that last part of the sentence there about graduated restrictions.
Y'all see that part? I'm gonna have to do that.
Okay. All right, going on to the next page then, Cynthia. This is under number 1, this is just termination for cause, and we've kind of pulled this from some of our existing lease language that's kind of been vetted by our attorneys and our finance department. So I think all of that is good unless there's any questions by the committee there. And same with the contract renewal terms, that once the initial contract expires on June 30th, 2024, they would be extended an additional 4 periods of 1 year each. That we would basically, both parties would talk about annually prior to the expiration of each term. So there's a potential there for up to 5.5 years roughly of occupation for the awarded contract. Okay. Go on to page 16. The highlighted areas there on the bottom and going into the next page, those are our insurance requirements as a government. If there's any questions, we can certainly look into answering those, but otherwise those come from our safety and risk department. Okay. Go down to the bottom there of 17, Cynthia. We will make that change again for the 1.5 year. We'll put the end date instead. Okay. And then in this section, what we do is, this is outlined somewhat similar to the scope in the previous pages, but this is where we basically ask or tell them in their proposal what they need to identify in a written document. And so we basically said, refer to section 3A1, which is all those uses, and describe, what your intent is with those uses, and tell us about how you plan to address the uses and the audience and the customers. We go on in number 2 there, the description of space needs. Tell us how you plan to utilize the space, along with a general layout of, we're not going to hold you necessarily to this room shall be this, but, give us an idea of how you plan to use the individual floors or one floor.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So yes, other space needs, when they're talking about how furniture, textiles, and other artifacts, is that referring to the existing artifacts? Or not necessarily things that are being brought in by the lessee?
No, I think that would be if they intend to bring anything in.
Okay.
what is it and how does it,
Okay.
how does the character match that of the facility
Gotcha.
itself?
Okay. But not necessarily like how they will interact with existing elements in specific rooms. So
I
like,
don't think so, because we don't know, well, quite honestly, we do know, but most of the furniture and everything in there
it's
is
good.
gonna be bone.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
As well then as the transportation plan, you know, how do you intend during special events of certain sizes to execute parking? Are you planning on having shuttles or bicycle parking or walk-up parking? I think it's important for them to identify if they're gonna have an event with 100 people and there's only 50 parking spaces, well, how is that gonna be handled then? We don't wanna kind of do it on the fly. All right, and then the next two parts under operations and management detail as many of the social resources, I think we can do there, of the community as possible that would be utilized by the tenant, to again benefit the residents. We'll change that to residents. And then describe again how the house will be open to as many residents as possible. And if they have any of those ideas, obviously, if their intent is to host private parties for a majority of the year, that's great. But then for those select events that are open to the community, how often do you anticipate that? And what is the citizenry or residents that you're aiming to appeal to?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We talked about the company background. This is again worded in a way that says the ideal vendor, but it doesn't limit who can still apply. The ideal vendor will have extensive experience with special events, including daily administration of a public facility or community significance, and possibly a destination for visitors. So again, I think that identifies, you know, we're certainly looking for that, but it doesn't prohibit you from doing so. Same with relevant experience. This is where we again say the ideal candidate will have a minimum of 3 references for public or private agencies. However, we go into it and we talk about or a minimum of 5 references for small businesses, businesses with less than 3 years of operation. That was the question mark I had in there. Was 3 years something that you all wanted to discuss? Was that too much, too little?
My question was, could we then expect every application to include the total number of years a business has been in operation?
Sure.
So it's not like someone can just leave that off and they've only been in business for 2 years.
Correct.
Okay. What do you think about 3 years?
5 years is better,
5 years?
Okay.
but generally businesses, especially the first 5 years, some of the small businesses tend to fail. So you know, if you make it after the 4th or you make it to the 5th year, I think it's showing that you're committed to it.
Okay, so we'll change that to 5 years then. Okay.
And then similar language that Commissioner Wright pointed out earlier, so has operated in a similar
Okay.
facility as well, though.
All right. Okay. On to page 19. And this opening paragraph, all we did was try to match the similar opening paragraph at the beginning of the RFP. So that's really the only change that took place there, is we tried to make the language similar.
Under the evaluation criteria?
I'm sorry, in that first paragraph right there. Yep. And then under the evaluation criteria, what we did is we assigned the points based on what we had talked about as a committee the last time. We basically used 100 points. And then understanding the project. We assigned 35 points. Basically, how do they address the project and the scope of work? Do they understand the scope and what we're expecting as a committee?
Any questions regarding the first paragraph? If it is determined that the number of proposals would otherwise be in the competitive range exceeds the number at which an efficient competition can be conducted.
Mhm.
I kind of see the utility of leaving it somewhat vague because, staff capacity and ours as well might vary. But I could foresee a situation in which if that is not previously stated, an entity might claim that has not been, deemed worthy for that discussion or something like that
Okay.
on an arbitrary basis.
Okay.
So I don't know if it'd be helpful for us to lay out okay, after 10, after 15, after 6, that's when we're gonna.
What I can do, Commissioner, is when we talk with our finance department,
Okay.
about this, I'll pose that question to them and see if we can assign a number.
Okay.
And if they're okay with it, is there a specific number that the committee would like to go with? But if they say no, we can't assign a number, obviously we'll leave it alone, but if they do
I
say.
think so, yeah, if they say no, just leave it alone. But what do you think, Patrick? Do you share that concern? If not, we might don't even have to worry about it.
That's your PhD. I'm like, what are you talking about?
So third line, where it talks about if there's more proposals, then we can evaluate, in an effective process, then we can sort of subjectively limit the number of proposals in a competitive range.
Oh, okay.
So just saying it feels like we have too many. Is that my correct reading of it? Okay. I don't know.
Well, if you had 50, you might not spend as much time on all 50. You might try to whittle it down to the 10.
Correct.
But you are still going to whittle it down.
Yes.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So if we get 100, for example,
Yeah.
it's not to say that all 100 wouldn't be vetted initially by finance or even staff. But I think what it allows then is by the time it maybe gets to the committee, maybe it's whittled down from 100 to 15 so that the committee only has to worry about the top 15 that make the cut.
So it can sort of vary, but depending on the total number of, proposals that we receive.
Yes.
That actually makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
But if it's 10, it's very likely that you will see all 10.
Right.
With this, I wouldn't expect that many, but
I don't
never know.
think there'll be a lot. There could be.
Yeah, but if we got 100, we may want to take a close look at 20 and 30. That makes sense.
Okay. So just, should we leave that vague then, Commissioner, or should we try to assign that?
I think only make it vague makes sense.
Okay.
Actually.
All right.
Now that's kind of been put in that.
And we would
Some
tell you,
hypothetical been laid out. Yeah.
we would tell you how many we received
Yes.
too. We're going to come back and say, hey, we've got this many. And then if it seems like it's too many, then the committee will decide, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the understanding of the project, we assigned 35 points to. That was more the significant, making sure everybody actually submits what they're supposed to submit, and answers all the questions.
Fill out your application, folks.
That's right. And then the project team, this goes into, who's actually a part of the business and what is their experience level and what are their qualifications. So we've assigned about 25 points to that. And actually goes into qualifications as a separate grading scale for another 25 points, qualifications and experience. So those two categories, they're kind of hand in hand, but we did separate them basically. One is who is the business or what entities make up the business, and then a separate category of how qualified are they and what is their experience. Okay. And then D, references and projects. What is their experience and what type of projects? Did they have good references, and were those projects that they're referencing similar in nature and actually applicable to what we're wanting them to do?
Can you explain E though? Contract to furnish equipment. Why would the county? No.
So I think with E, and it's only for 5 points, because this is a historic house, and again, we're hoping that it's obviously open to the public or to, private businesses, but that it's a mainstay of the whole entire function is the house.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important that, whoever comes in and wants to utilize this facility, that they're bringing something to the table as far as displays and memorabilia and artifacts. And
Atheniana.
exactly. That's right. So it's not, make or break, hopefully. It's only 5 points, but it's something maybe to consider, you know, as part of the proposal. Is that okay with the
Yeah.
committee? Okay. And then, go ahead.
Before you go any further, what is SOW and A?
It's a statement of work, so it's a good catch. I think
Yes.
we should spell it out.
Okay.
I also wondered, yeah, if it could reference page numbers, like you can jump back instead of like sifting through the documents to find what the SOW is.
Yeah, we'll just specify scope of work on it. Okay. And then we added that next section, and we talked about in parentheses, that for the shortlisting of firms, once the committee has sort of narrowed down, you know, a select number of possible bidders, which ones do we then want to bring in for a second round of interviews? And then that would be the interview with presentation grading, that would occur in letter F.
Okay.
And we'll change that interaction.
One of the questions that Commissioner Wright had was, should we list the who here? Who are the committee members so that the applicant would know who they potentially be interviewing with?
I think that might be
Yeah,
for the, you know, try to like, hey Patrick, you're trying to get some steak, and I'm playing, but you know.
Yeah.
But reach out to us outside of the committee to try to work on things in an informal way that might not be appropriate.
Okay. And then are there other departments that would be involved in the interviews was one other question.
so I think that's a good question. What we typically do is once the RFP is put out, we work with finance during that interim period on a grading sheet, that, you know, transfers these scores onto a sheet. And then we identify with finance the actual committee that's going to do the grading. And so obviously I think the property committee members may be on that, but then whatever the property committee decides as far as staff, it could just be that the committee members themselves are the only ones that are actually grading and staff is in the room with any questions. But if the committee wants staff to also have a vote and grade the proposals, that could be an option as well. But that, I don't know if it's necessarily one that has to be decided prior to the RFP going out.
Yeah. No worry about it.
That's fine.
Good.
Okay. All right. And then that last paragraph just talks about, based on the evaluation criteria, the selection committee will review and assign a score. Proposals which rank the highest will be shortlisted. The number of shortlisted firms will depend on the total number of submittal proposals. And that the committee will then invite anyone to make a formal presentation or interview based on the experience. And upon completion of all that, the selection committee will score and recommend an award. Any questions on that? Okay. And that's really it. The rest of the sheets are all from finance and on the standard.
All right.
Cool.
I have one general question, if you don't mind. I know I've read this before, but I just thought of it. Do you think it's clear that they don't have to apply for the whole facility? That they can apply for just, or does that come in an application that they have to fill out?
One of the forms said space usage, one basement floor, second floor, and the third floor.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that was clear, because
That then makes you think about, do we, as a, you know, evaluation body, or whoever may make up that, you know, that body, do they have to consider compatibility of tenants?
Oh, that's a
So like if there's multiple tenants and one is gonna be throwing raves and the other one is a daycare, does that go into our selection? Like, oh, these are both ranked very highly, but may not be highly compatible.
Sure. I mean, would the committees,
So we'll vet that through the committee process, correct? At the final, or
the proposals will get vetted, yes, but I'm wondering if, for example, Cynthia, if you brought up page 13, in number 2, where it's highlighted the proposed lease area is limited to the basement, main, and third top floors, would you prefer that we add something that says, but does not require but does not require a proposed tenant utilize the entire space, something along those
Yeah.
lines. Would that be?
Can you repeat that?
So with that gray, number two, the proposed lease area is limited to the basement, main and top
Oh,
floors.
it's specifying, but they don't necessarily have to use all of them.
But a proposed tenant is not required to utilize all 3 floors.
Okay.
Okay.
And then to Commissioner Davenport's point about compatibility, do you want us to add a sentence in there as well about how the committee will consider compatible uses?
Does that need to be like a, part of the rubric? Like, score for compatibility with the
Yeah.
other uses? Just so that it's something that we could, quantitatively take into account.
So I think what we would do is on page 18, Cynthia. That's the rubric part. Right there under proposed use. They're expected to tell us about the proposed use per the guidelines in that section 3. We can add another bullet point there that says, something about compatibility with other tenants, if you want us to. Yes?
And then perhaps, I can't remember the exact, what we discussed is like the scoring process, but sort of having that additional rubric item as like, I don't know how to say it, other than like a tiebreaker, like if needed, scoring along those lines as well. Because I imagine most of the applicants are going to want the entire space.
Yeah.
So if we don't need it, we don't need to take that into consideration, I guess. But if we perhaps whittled it down, then we can evaluate it based on that extra criterion. Does that make sense?
Well, I think, Commissioner, you're right. I think that's something the committee should be able to do.
Mhm.
I think it might be covered broadly, though, that basically the criteria right now, when it comes to the use, is covered under a understanding of the project and the scope of work. That's on page 19, Cynthia. Right there, letter A. So we're gonna grade them on their team, which is B. We're gonna grade them on their qualifications, C, references, D, and furniture. So everything else, in my opinion, is under A, which is everything listed under the scope of work, which is that previous section we had just talked about, putting compatibility within. So I think it's built in there that you have the right to grade someone based on compatibility without spelling it out.
Okay.
If that's okay. Okay. All right,
Cool.
we can make those changes.
Sweet.
What else?
That's it. On a side note, Junior League had a partnership or a lease agreement for the furniture. Can the county or whoever, let's say a new tenant do a walk process and they want to keep some of that furniture or attain some of that furniture and the artwork, can we enter an agreement, and does that tenant have to enter that agreement to retain some of that furniture and artwork?
So I believe the way that it's structured right now is that the agreement is not with Athens-Clarke County. The agreement for the furniture is with the Junior League.
Mhm.
And so my understanding is once the Junior League vacates, that person that holds title to the furniture is also going to remove the furniture accordingly. Now, I don't think it prohibits us from ever entering into an agreement if we were to be approached by that entity about keeping some furniture. I do think, though, it's something that needs to work with whoever the new prospective tenant is, because I wouldn't want us to force furniture on them that may not fit with what they're wanting to do from a use standpoint.
But it's something we could facilitate, is what you're saying?
Yeah, if at any point in the future we wanted to do that, I don't think it prohibits us from doing so.
All right.
Anything else?
I think it makes sense.
So at this point, we're just looking for the final blessing from y'all, that you're ready for us to, if we make these edits, is there something we can post, or do we need to meet again?
I think it's ready.
I think it's ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to take any formal action, or can we just
Yeah.
do it on hand?
I think it'd be good if you do take formal action.
Oh,
I I'm Bobby Epting. I was told by Tim Denson that I might be invited to speak, and I know it's not a public meeting, but by invitation of the chair, it would be appropriate.
We don't have a chair.
We don't.
Hi, what would you like to tell us about?
Two things. One is I would ask you to look at A2, your space, and you might want to also add the existence of the two outbuildings, you know, to delineate that that's part of the property, but they're buildings. So that's on page 13. But other than that, may I spend a couple minutes of your time?
I think maybe
You could say no.
at this point,
For what purpose, if I may ask respectfully?
I have been very interested in this project and have been working on it just as a member of the public.
Yeah.
With some background in the area. And I think you all are doing a fabulous job. That's the bottom line of all of it. But there's probably like three things. I have 5 pages worth of notes.
engage if you're thinking about applying.
You said you aren't interested, you're just thinking about like feedback on the
Yes.
request for proposals and that's.
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, that's why I just
Okay,
want to
yeah.
make sure that if
I
you're
just
planning on
also.
applying. Okay,
I've been there and done that.
okay, all right. As long as y'all are comfortable as the committee members.
The other thing is, I think it's appropriate in your minutes to identify people that are present. So again, I will be short. I'm Bobby Epting. I live at 250 Oak Grove Road. I'm here only representing myself, no other organization or entity that I'm. Trust for Historic Preservation, former president of the Junior League of Athens, and current member of the Historic Preservation Commission. A historical note that I'd just like to share is Robert Taylor, who began building the house in 1844, built it as a summer cottage and also as for student housing, you know, for his children, which was kind of interesting. But then 20 years later, Henry Grady's dad bought the house, and that was 1863. Henry Grady's dad died in the war. And so Henry Grady and his mom, a single mom, did not live in the house except for the 3 years when he was a student. He was a student and graduated when he was 18 years old. And then he went on, obviously, to have a tradition that he's now associated with this house. But again, they only lived there for 3 years, he and his mom. The other thing, and there are only 77 students that graduated with him in those early years. Interesting parallel, Junior League of Athens was begun by another teenager, Mary Harriman, 1881 to 1934. At 19, she was inspired by a college lecture and started a women's volunteer organization, basically to do good in the New York tenements. And mostly those tenements, of course, were the Taylor Grady House being a part of it, but it sort of is. So that sort of gets to, again, there's more history here than we really know about just from scant kind of things. The important thing is in 1968, the city actually bought the house for $90,000, and Mayor Julius Bishop presented the then it's called the Junior League, Junior Assembly at the time, proposal, and the city council agreed to it for them to restore as their headquarters and to do benefit to the community, which they've certainly done. So that's for over 50 years. They've done more good for more folk in that time than any time would allow to delineate. They've been stewards, if you will, and I think that terminology of stewards, rather than ownership like the ACC or the
proprietors, another term. I think stewardship, particularly of historic properties, is important. But my question to you, one of the questions is, do you know the history, the original purpose of the Simon Michael building that's right here on our block? Well, a little bit of research, you'll find that that was originally a junior league project, again, for individuals in this community with needs. More public-private and nonprofit collaboration is really what that 50-year history, I think, of the Junior League and the city is, and is an opportunity to be celebrated. I only have suggested that the Taylor Grady House should be renamed the Junior League of Athens House. The longevity and good that's come out of that organization for the community, far beyond a wealthy builder and a student who went on to get the name for himself. Fast forward to now, simply this. First, to commend Mayor Gertz, the ACC staff, and you, the elected officials, charged with considering the management, and I would even say again, the stewardship of an important property that has deep roots and hopefully a bright future. I listened to your May 18th meeting reporting and appreciated your thoughtful considerations and occasional humor. I hope today's meeting was equally productive, and I would agree to that. Three of the things from the purpose statement I wanted to highlight: events facility, office space, and community center. These are just my comments, my ideas, particularly about programming for events. Many of you probably have gone to that Van Gogh immersive, and one of the things that was distinctive there was the VR, virtual reality. I think there's such an opportunity to interpret history, to interpret architecture, interpret the history of Athens in ways that haven't been done before. I even saw recently there was a competition for landscape architects in Great Britain, and the two competitors actually put up their proposals in VR so that the applicants could get a real sense of it in real time. So you can go back, you can go current, and you can go forward with that technology. The other thing about office space, even today at the Linden House, there was a historic Athens sponsored lecture about the Pump House, past, present, and future. One of your staff members, Alex, was there, and he noted that in part due to your budget approval for new staff for that area, they need new space. And so until I heard your comments earlier, I said, that'll be great. They can take the bottom floor, for those offices, and the top floor and leave for the second floor. But I certainly understand that conversation had gone a little bit differently. But it would be interesting to keep, anyway, but if you're not there. One of the things too that in the virtual reality, let me back up to that just a minute. One of the other stories that might be told is who were the builders of the house that now, is a National Historic Landmark. And presumably, many of those craftspeople were people of color. And I will admit, having been involved, that the story of the league is late coming to, like all of us, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But they certainly have done it, and I think there's more that could be done there. I guess sort of finally, community center, among the prospective lessees that we've been talking with and some that are still considering making application, I think it meets your ACC goal number 2, identifying closed gaps in partnerships with the community. Again, this feels like a very cogent continuation and extension of the Junior League historical interest and collaborations. And again, there's lots of details that you all stored out, and the Junior League obviously is working about its furnishings fixtures, but just on my research, just FYI, determined that there were about 183 items in the house on their schedule. There only represents about 30 donors or donor groups, and Mr. Sands, Albert Sands, donated the majority, about 119, UGA 16, most of those are on loan, and then unidentified 9, and the other, donors of those 30 had fewer items, and many of most of them are dead. So I'm not speaking for anybody, and it's just me, but I do want to encourage you, and you have done, that you're recognizing values. It's not just economic. There's more to it than that. I'm a little bit not distressed, but that period of time, that turnover time is going to be quick, and but that's what it is. But also, I'm a little concerned about if we didn't have more time, if we could make more time to think more broadly as a community about better, broader uses for the Taylor Grady House. That might have been pretty exciting. And finally, I guess that we're on this yet. And you all have been spectacular about that.
And thank you so much for giving some of that historical context I didn't know, but I had been reading up a little bit on the house.
Yeah.
And like the master's thesis that had been written on it.
Exactly.
And they didn't even get to some of that. So, I really appreciate you sharing that and wondered if you wouldn't mind also sharing that via email, if you wouldn't mind typing it up, because I think if you don't know, I mean, you've already done a lot of work in being here today and sharing that with us, but I was thinking with regards to our existing rubric, like having some of that information when we sit down to review the house and think about the ways that any proposals are sort of honoring some of that legacy and hard work that you discussed.
Happy to do it for you.
That would be fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Motion on the floor.
Motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Oh, wait, no, there's no motion on the floor. I say motion to adjourn. I motion that with today's proposed changes, we move the RFP out of committee and open it to applicants.
Yes, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then I vote to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. If I would say nay, what would happen?
We don't have to fight to death.
You know what
I
it
didn't have to have a anymore, so the